welcome to the premiere episode of the Books at B'ShERT podcast. This podcast was recorded live at B'ShERT and features the author of My Mother's Money, Beth Pinsker, a certified financial planner and financial journalist. Beth is in conversation with George Manis of AARP magazine, and they are introduced by Rabbi Heidi Hoover. Looking ahead, on December 4th, this coming Thursday, our second episode will be recorded live at B'ShERT, featuring author Jennifer Baum, who wrote the book Just City, Growing Up on the Upper West Side When Housing Was a Human Right, in conversation with Executive Vice President Jeff Levinson. We look forward to seeing you there. Please do turn out. Again, December 4th, 7:30 p.m. at the Temple. You can RSVP by emailing office@bshert.org or visit our website for more information at bshert.org. And now for our conversation with Beth Pinsker.
My absolute pleasure to introduce Beth Pinsker. Beth and I come from the same hometown, and we were high school contemporaries in different high schools, and we didn't actually know each other then, although we knew people in common.
Yes.
Because it's not that big of a place.
Yeah.
And so then we grew up and we went our separate ways, and then through work, Beth met Mike, and that was how we ultimately reconnected. But the reason that Beth is here today is because she has written this incredibly helpful and incredibly readable book that she's here to tell us about. And I really wanted to shout this from the rooftops because I read the first 30 pages and was like, oh my God. And so Beth is a certified financial planner, but also went through all of the personal work of dealing with the finances of a family member. And so I won't say anything further, and I want to introduce Beth Pinsker, and she'll introduce who is with her.
So, thank you. I planted the crowd with family members over here, so that, but who is with me is George Manis. He's the personal finance editor of AARP magazine. And AARP has, his championing of the book was really helpful in getting the word out about the book, because when your book gets mentioned in AARP magazine, it's just about the greatest gift in the world, because so many people get that magazine. So, and he's been a friend of mine and a personal finance mentor to me. So I asked him to come here today to help stoke the conversation, which is being recorded in various different ways. So, so we will record this for posterity and also to help the people in the room. So, take it away.
I will take it away. So, Beth, my first question for you is, at what point, tell me about the moment when you realized, oh my gosh, I have to be a financial caregiver.
So that moment came when my mom was scheduled for having surgery in November of 2022. She called me up and she said, I got a date for the surgery. Can you come down here and help me and just do whatever I need to be done? And, we all get that phone call at some point in our lives. Heidi probably gets it more than most people, because, when you can't take care of your stuff, you have to pass it off to somebody else. And I was that person for my mom, because, not that my brother isn't a competent human being. It's just that, some stuff, or the practical stuff, was sort of my domain. And so I took, on that role for my mom, and it just was like, go with the flow, see what happens, see what she needs. She could have surgery and be better right away. She could go be in rehab for 2 weeks and then go back to her life. It just didn't turn out that way for her, because she had surgery, then she got an infection, then she had more complications and more surgery, and it was like 8 or 9 months, and she never, from that moment she had surgery, she never got back to taking over her life. But 8 or 9 months, the mortgage needs to be paid. The electric bills need to be paid. We have to move money around. We have to hire caregivers. We have to fire caregivers, organize their schedules. Like the whole life of a human being has to pass into my responsibility to take care of. And when you have to take over that much stuff, it's just really, really hard to manage.
Hard to imagine, because you're actually being both a caregiver and a financial caregiver, both of which are basically things we could talk about for hours. But let's focus on the financial caregiving. When did the first problem come up? Like, how prepared were you to be taking care of her finances? And when did you first discover that you weren't prepared to take care of her finances?
We were not prepared at all, and it took all of 4 days. So my mom goes into surgery on a Tuesday. She comes out of surgery Wednesdays, just like the whole thing is kind of a fog to me still, like those first couple days. But by Friday was the day that the helpers got paid. So my mom's in the hospital. She can barely move. Her arms are swollen. She's out of it and fuzzy. And I have the power of attorney papers in my hand, but I hadn't given them into the bank yet. And I have her checkbook, and I have the power of attorney papers, and I have this lady, these 3 ladies that need to be paid. So my choices at that moment were, grab my mom's hand and have it make a mark on the check, forge her name on the check, or write my own check. But it was a couple $1,000s that needed to be paid out, and that's a lot of money for me to cover on the spot. So I had to decide what I was going to do in that moment. We were 4 days in. I was exhausted from sitting by a hospital bedside for a couple of days, and that's how long it took for us to have a financial crisis.
And what was the choice that you made?
Just in this room, I forged her name on the check. I'm really good at that. I didn't put that in the book. I kind of fudged over the facts of that, but I knew it was wrong, and I knew it wasn't I knew it wasn't how we should handle things. I didn't want to write out the check myself. Also because my mom had long-term care insurance, and I wasn't sure if she didn't make the payment herself, would they reimburse the amount? So, these are all things that you're not thinking about ahead of time, and I didn't think about them, about the practicalities of it. But I got to the bank very quickly after that to enact the power of attorney, and that was this whole other trauma of trying to get the bank to accept the power of attorney. But that first day, I fudged it a little bit.
I have to say, you are not the first person I know of who, with the best of intentions, has signed somebody else's name.
Yeah, it's really hard though these days, because there is signature recognition that is very sophisticated. I went to this estate planning conference 2 weeks ago, and I was talking to a woman who worked at an estate planning company, and she was taking care of her mom. Her mom had dementia, and she realized that her deceased father was still the beneficiary on her mother's retirement account. And she needed to fix that because she didn't know what was going to happen with her mom. But her mom couldn't call the brokerage company and say, please give me a form. Like, that was too much. So she's like, do I need to put the power of attorney in to get this stupid form? I'm just going to call up the brokerage company. It's one of the major ones, like Fidelity or Vanguard or one of those. I'm just going to call up and say I'm my mom for this one little instance, and just say, can you please send a beneficiary form, change form, to my house? And she called up and she said, whatever her mother's name is. And there was a hold, and somebody came on the line and said, it doesn't sound like you're the person who you say you are. And she's like, oh no, and she hung up. You can't, it's really hard to get away. And then the next thing that happens is, you have your mom's password, and you log into her bank account, and they two-factor it, right? So then they send a code to your mom's phone, and my mom was 1,000 miles away from me most of the time. I would call her up on the phone, and I'd say, did they just send a code to your phone? And she'd say, oh, what, a code to my phone? I don't know, I'm gonna have to check. And then she wouldn't be able to find it, and then I'd have another code sent. And then by the time that she would find the first code, and then it would have timed out, And it's a mess to deal with getting phone codes sent to elderly people. I'm sorry, but everything's so sophisticated these days. You really get caught short trying to fake it anymore.
So when you sort of came up for air and said, well, I can't keep doing that thing that we will not say that you did over and over again, where did you, there's so much to deal with. Where did you start?
I started with a simple budget, which I took out my phone and I went to my mom's desk and I opened the notepad and I said, okay, how much money, looking at her bank statement from last month, which was like just sitting there on her desk, how much money even comes into the household? I had no clue. I didn't know what her Social Security payment was. I didn't know what other money there was. Turns out she had like this small pension because she was a public school teacher. And so she had incoming into her account, Social Security and her pension. I put that at the top, and then I'm like, okay, what are her recurring bills? What's her mortgage? What does she pay? How does she even pay these things? And I started to make a list of all the outgoing payments, and it became very clear, very fast, that the number at the top was less than the number that was adding up on the bottom. And I'm like, how does she do this? There must be other money that's coming in. Well, there was other money because, she had retirement accounts, and every year in December she would take her required minimum distribution, and that would sit in her bank account, and when she needed money, she would just take money from her savings account to cover the other expenses. But this wasn't a conversation my mom and I had ever had, and she wasn't able to have that conversation with me at that particular moment. I was on my own completely. She was not available.
I'm going to cut in here. I am a personal finance journalist. You're a personal finance journalist. I bet you, like me, have written or edited 17 stories on the importance of sharing financial information with your adult children.
Yes.
Can you tell me if you had tried to do this before then and what happened or what didn't happen?
Yeah, so we had broad conversations about it, but not nitty-gritty conversations about it. My mom was so super competent up until that moment that I didn't think she needed any help, and that it wasn't apparent to me that roadmap was going to be so essential. When my dad got ill, which was 5 years to the day before my mom, they had to hire caregivers for him, and it was a big deal because they had only a certain amount of nest egg. They weren't wealthy people. Most of the money that my mom had came from death benefits when my father died. So when my father was alive and he needed care, it was like a big bomb to their budget. And she got worried about it, so worried, in fact, that they still had 2 homes at that point. They had an apartment in Florida and a home in New Jersey, and they still went back and forth. And my mom right away decided, we can't manage that. We're going to sell the house in New Jersey. And so she was already back in Florida then. Somebody needed to sell the house in New Jersey, and that was me. I had to clean it out. I had to, help her stage it and all of that kind of thing. So that got us talking about the big finances. Like, okay, this is how much mortgage do you have on this house? How much mortgage do you have on your other house? Where's the money from the sale of this property going to go? And how far will that get you? We had those big discussions, but not, do you still pay your electric bill electronically, or do you have it set on auto pay? We didn't get down to that level of things. But when I had to step in, it was like that tire screeching halt. The car came to a stop, and I had to just take over in the driver's seat. And so I had to figure out all those little intricacies that you never think about, that maybe somebody needs to follow your directions. I'm pointing at him specifically.
So here, it's obviously then out of that came this book and the idea for this book.
Yes.
Can you tell me, when you think to yourself and you want to say to someone, don't make the mistake that I made, any of the mistakes that I made, either by omission or commission, obviously the first answer is buy my book and then learn the lesson. But if before I buy the book, tell me what is the first thing that I know, like as you kind of look back on all the hassles that you faced, what is like the one place that you would have started ahead of time that might have made the financial burden and the administrative burden less burdensome?
I think it's understanding that there's a why there. Like, why are we talking about all of this? Why are we doing any of this for each other? It's hard stuff, right? But you're gonna do it. Like nobody, it's really hard to say no to. And if it's somebody you love, you're gonna do it. Like there's no getting out of it. Like this stuff, it's stuff that needs to be done, and you're gonna do it. So, like where to start is like being aware that like there are other people in your life, and that eventually you're going to have to do stuff for other people, and somebody's going to have to do stuff for you. And if you think about it that way, then you think, okay, well, how is that going to happen? Is that going to be a mess, or is that do I want to make it easier for everybody involved? And if your answer is, I want to make it easier for everybody involved, then get the instruction book, or get some kind of instruction book, or think about it, or talk about it, or do something. And if you don't care to make it easier for anybody else, then keep going about your business. They'll figure it out eventually. It'll just be messy and hard.
Let's bring that. Give us a little more detail there. You're talking to a family. There's a parent, adult, child, and they say, okay, where do we start? Like, what's the first piece of paper that we have to think about? Where do we start? Where do we go first?
The easiest place to start and the best place to start is with a durable power of attorney and a healthcare proxy.
Explain
because those are two very simple documents. You can download them from the internet pretty easily. And they basically give permission for another human being to take over for you in the case of an emergency. And the analogy I use is leaving a spare key at the neighbor's house, right? Like we all understand the concept that we might get locked out someday, or there might be some kind of emergency, and it's good to have somebody else who has the keys to your house. Now, you understand in that relationship, you're not inviting them to let themselves in at 3 o'clock in the morning to make coffee whenever they feel like it, right? These are for emergency circumstances only. So the healthcare proxy and the durable power of attorney are like the emergency key to your finances, and you want them set up ahead of time in case something bad should happen to you, because once something bad happens to you, you can't have the keys, like nobody has the keys. So you want to, it's not handing over like complete control of your finances. It's not saying, I'm done, please take over for me. Nothing actually has to happen when you have these documents. You just have them in case of emergency. And that's why they're kind of like easy. They're very simple, like legal documents that say, I, Beth Pinsker, want Abigail Gladstone, my daughter, to make my decisions for me, except she's 17 and she can't. And then that's like you can add specific circumstances. If you do these online through one of the services that's available, there's a widget. It's like, filling out your taxes online. Lots of people do that these days, right? So it'll walk you through. Do you have a house? Do you want them to have access to your safe deposit box if you have one? Do you want them to be able to sell property? There's a bunch of questions it'll ask. And you answer the questions, and then it prints it out. You take it to a notary, and it's ready to go. In New York, you have to get the accepting party to sign it and also notarize it if they want to use it. So it's like two separate signatures that are needed to actually use it. But the healthcare proxy is the same thing, but for medical decisions.
I'll just return to the power of attorney for a moment. I think you write in your book, and I have edited stories myself about financial people who have powers of attorney, and then the bad thing happens, and they take it over to the bank or the brokerage. And somebody at the brokerage looks at it and says, no, we can't use this.
Yeah.
that is, how do you head off that problem, which is as they say in the computer business, that's a known issue.
You cannot actually head it off, as far as I know. Like, you have to just sort of bulldoze your way through it. It's like the bank puts up a wall, and you think it's a brick wall, but it's not actually a brick wall. It's like a fake wall. And if you know that your document is good and valid and legal, you just have to keep pressing forward and make them do it. They're really annoying about it. They will say no for many different reasons. We recently had an issue, and the reason they said no is because the copy that was sent to them the notary seal, they couldn't feel the bumps. Yeah, it wasn't a raised seal. Like, go figure, like that's not really a reason. And that's not like a valid reason. And so you have to go back to them and back to them and back to them. And when I went to the bank, they said no to me. And I said, you have to say yes. Like, I don't have any other choice here. I have to be able to get into my mother's bank account. And so we're going to have to work this out. And, so, it took a 2-hour appointment that first time for me to just like go back and forth, them saying no and me saying you have to. And then I came back for a second 2-hour appointment, and then a third 2-hour appointment. And finally, and at the end of that third 2-hour appointment, I had access to her bank accounts and the safe deposit box. So I was successful. It just took a lot of time out of my schedule when I was already busy with my mom in the hospital, with a full-time job, and kids at home. So like it's an extra burden that you don't really need, but if you're not expecting it, then it's you sort of get flustered, and you sometimes will take no for an answer when you shouldn't. With a lot of the stuff of financial caretaking, you're going to hear no a lot. You're going to hear, we want to discharge your loved one, or all sorts of no's come into this process, and you have to know your rights in order to know when to push back.
One thing I really like about your book is, you and I, as people writing about personal finance and giving people advice, we say, do this, do this, do this, do this. But then there is, as you just talked about there with the bank, the real world experience of like banging your head against the wall. Were there any, as you kind of think about this, were there any times where you were either surprised by what happened, either pleasantly, or were there any pleasant surprises in the whole thing?
I will say that I was very impressed by the care that the caregivers gave. I didn't really, I was there because I loved my mom, and I looked at these people that we hired as there because we paid them. But it wasn't really because we paid them. Like they were nice people, and they did way beyond the call of duty for my mom. And I think there are a lot of caregivers that you get out there that just, they go beyond, and they're paid so little. There's no way that they are doing that job solely for the money and doing a good job at it, no less, because it's the job is too hard and the pay is too little. It doesn't make sense that they would be good at it. And care about it, and stay late and stay extra and do things that they aren't even paid to do. They were just very caring, loving people, and they made my life so much easier. I could not have functioned in this entire crisis without the people we paid to help my mom.
That's really something.
Yeah.
There are probably people here with questions.
Yes.
That they might have on this particular subject. If I'll stop asking my questions now and give others a chance. You, sir.
I've read a couple of chapters in your book, and they're spot on. And you were mentioning that you were being frustrated in some processes, for instance, with the bank. Now, there's another person who could get involved. If you use an attorney with the bank, would that have saved you a lot of frustration, a lot of time? But then again, lawyers cost money, so you gotta balance it.
Yeah.
But when you think back, if the bank got a lawyer's letter after your first attempt, would that have eased your process?
The banks say no to the lawyers too. From my experience, so the lawyers I interviewed, there was one lawyer in particular that I interviewed and used in the book. She got so frustrated with one bank when they wouldn't accept a power of attorney document that she drew up herself as an elder law expert, that she sued the bank. She had to sue the bank to get them to accept this document. And she said, I can't believe we have to take it this far, but I'm suing you. And she filed an actual lawsuit. And because of there are state statutes that say that if the paperwork is valid, the bank has to accept it. And she knew her paperwork was valid, so she pressed forward, and then they settled and they apologized. But the thing you have to know is your paperwork valid? My mom had moved from Pennsylvania to New Jersey to Florida. A lot of people don't update their documents along the way. So if they're state specific, and if my mom had been trying to use a power of attorney form from Pennsylvania from 15 years prior, they might have been right to say no. But I had made sure that when my father died, that my mom got all new documents and that everything was updated. So it was drawn up by a lawyer within 5 years, and it was a perfectly good legal document. So as long as you know that you're right, you just have to be like, I am not leaving this place until you satisfy me. I am standing my ground, and you have to do it.
What's the wisdom of adding yourself to your parents' accounts before you need to, before the crisis?
So a lot of people think that is the ultimate solution. Like, but why bother with power of attorney? I'll just be a joint owner. Well, for me, one of the issues is that those are then joint assets. You own that asset as much as your parents. I have the next 8 years, I'm filling out financial aid forms for college. I have no control over what's in my mother's account. So I would have to find out what's in that account at the time I'm filling out the financial aid form and then count that as my assets. I didn't want to do that. I'm also a divorced person. If I have to make a financial settlement, that money has to go on there. If you have creditors of any sort, those are assets that can be seized. Then you have sibling issues. When you are joint owners on an account with somebody, there's no oversight, right? You have as much control over that account as anybody else who's a joint owner. So if it's you and your mother. You and your mother both have access to those funds. You can take money out, you can put money in. If you have a sibling who is not a joint owner on the account, they might get a little mad about that. It works in happy families. It doesn't work in unhappy families. It also then supersedes any beneficiary designation or anything anybody's put in a will. So if your mom puts you on her account and then says in the will, I want my bank account to be split between my two kids, it doesn't happen. The money goes to the kid who's on the account. And then that kid has to say, okay, well, mom wanted us to split it, I'll give you half, but you don't have to. So, it all depends on what the dynamics are going on underneath it. And if you can show me a happy family in this country, I'll give you $1,000. Not every family has its little pits of unhappiness where, there's conflict. So
all that being said, your book also says the power of attorney dies when the person dies.
Yes.
And so what can you do?
So then there's a gap. So when somebody dies, there's like this 2-week gap where you don't have access to funds because the power of attorney ceases, and then you can't. Usually there are beneficiaries named on a bank account, or it's passed in a will or whatever. Until you get the death certificate, you can't really do anything about it. So it takes like 10 days to 2 weeks to get death certificates. So all that money gets locked down, and you have bills to pay, you have a funeral to pay for, you've got travel and expenses and things, and the money gets locked down. So what we did was a little mix of everything. We had power of attorney for some accounts, and we had one account that was joint, and I could move money between them. So right before my mom died, and we had some advance notice, Not everybody gets advance notice, but like my mom went home from the hospital on hospice. Like we knew what was going to happen. And so I had time, I had about 2 weeks where I could, figure out what we needed. And I moved money out of her checking account into her savings account where I was the joint owner. And then I was able to move it out of there so that it didn't get tied up in this process. So it can feel like a little ghoulish to be moving money around when somebody's about to die. And you can get into problems with siblings, but you sort of have to figure out how much money is involved, how much money is needed, and what you need to do. I had this one letter writer into MarketWatch, and she wrote in and said, my dad's plan for this time period right after he dies is to leave me and my brother each checks for $25,000 and hide them in the house. And then after he dies, we can go and get the checks and cash them. And I'm like, wait a second, that is not going to work. Like, what if he dies a year and a half from now and the checks are no longer valid, first of all? Second of all, they're going to shut the bank account down. You're not going to be able to cash them. Third of all, like, what if there's not enough money in the accounts? Or more money, it just didn't make any sense. I'm like, that is not, please don't have your dad do that. Please figure out a better plan. That is not what you should be doing.
So, this is, first of all, God bless you. Second, it's obviously like a very specific how-to book that you wrote, but it's also the story about your mom's passing and her illness. How did it feel for you to write that?
It was hard. The really hardest part was I had been writing about our struggles that she and I kind of faced together while she was sick. And I had stopped writing about them when she got to the end. Like when she went home on hospice, I stopped writing any columns because I didn't want to write about that part. And I didn't want to have to write any sentences. I'd written like maybe 8, 9 columns up until that point while she was sick. And I didn't want to write the one that had to say like, okay, sorry readers, I have to tell you some bad news. My mother has passed away. I just couldn't do it. And and time was passing. And I was just like, I'm not going to write about this ever again because I don't want to write those words. And then the government shorted my mom her last Social Security check. Of course they did. And I got so mad on her behalf, and I thought the whole system of the last Social Security check is so messed up. Like, everybody has a problem with it one way or another. Either you get money you shouldn't get and you have to give it back, or the government takes it back right out of your bank account and it makes people so angry. Or the bank account, like my mom's bank account got locked down so quickly, the check never landed that she was supposed to get because my mom had the wisdom to die on the first of a month. And what people don't understand is that Social Security, unlike any other bill you have in your life, is not prorated. So if you do not make it to the end of a particular month, like you die at June 30th, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you do not get your Social Security for June, the whole month of June, even though you lived until the 30th. It would cost, like, I don't know, the number's in the book, but it's like $18 billion or something to fix that, and like $9 billion to prorate it to half the month. And so the government just has no interest in fixing this problem. So I think my mom purposefully lived until July 1st in order to get that last Social Security payment. I don't know the answer to that question, but she died on July 1st and she was due a payment, but her bank, the check drops like, July 8th for June. And so the bank account was already shut and she never got that money. My mom was one of those people, like, she wanted what was hers and she didn't want anybody to take anything from her. Depression mentality, whatever you want to call it. But if she was due money from the government, she wanted to get it. So I was determined to get that money for her. But trying to get money from the Social Security Administration is not the easiest thing in the world. So it took about 4 months for me to wind my way through the paperwork and the waiting and whatnot. And then magically, this money just showed up that we were due. And I was so happy about it. I thought, people need to understand this. It's like rampant misinformation out there. I really owe it to people to explain it to them in a way that they can understand. And so I went back at it, and that was when I was able to face, it was like 4 to 6 months after my mother died, and I was ready to deal with it. And I think that's when I really started to think, okay, if I can write about that part of the process, I can turn this into a book of everything, because I didn't want to write about her death, but if I'm able to, it could help people. So you already have one.
Can you talk about the process of deciding when to start triggering a long-term care insurance policy and what goes into that? Yes.
So one of the main triggers is, to be honest with you, is can you still afford the premium? My aunt recently triggered her long-term care insurance policy because the premium was so high, and she's 85 years old, and she thought, if I can qualify for this, I just might as well, because then I'm not paying $8,000 a year. Instead, I'm receiving money. So it's now or never, right? If I outlast my long-term care policy, I'll figure it out on the other side, and in the meantime, I'll have saved all this money. The key is, do you qualify? I heard from somebody recently, one of the podcasts I was doing had questioners. She said her mother was 100 years old, and she couldn't get her qualified for her long-term care insurance policy. And she's like, what should I do? And I'm like, get a different doctor. There has to be some doctor, like have a doctor come on a bad day. Like a 100-year-old person has to have a bad day every once in a while, that they qualify for 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. Like there has to be some way to certify that person that they qualify. Don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
Right, so that's a high cost, right?
Yes.
That's a high cost, but also it's a quality of life issue. Like my mom only got help in the house because she had that long-term care policy. Because she was like, okay, well, I have the long-term care policy, that's what it's for, I will hire some help. It probably forestalled a lot of bad things from happening, that she had somebody looking out for her. So if you think about quality of life, your mom has quality of life now that she could go and do and enjoy things. And if she has somebody helping her, maybe she could make a few more visits to people. Maybe she could get out and about a little bit better. Like if it helps her have better quality of life now, when she can actually experience that for herself, it's probably better than having, more help on the back end. So for my mom, it was like that, she got this helper and she was able to have a dinner party, and have people over for dinner. And that made her so happy to be able to experience that when she thought she was done cooking for the rest of her life because she couldn't manage in the kitchen. So, a little help when you can actually do stuff is sometimes better than a lot of help when you can't do anything.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in with another question here. You mentioned arguments on text. I hope they're limited to text. And my particular family, my wife's parents are in assisted living right now. She has 2 siblings, and her parents need 24-hour care. And luckily, everybody is on the same page. There's a lot of agreement between the children about what to do. Either in your own family or in other families people that you have talked to or heard from, there are arguments, there are disagreements. How do you tamp those down? How do you is there any magic solution or possible solution to getting everybody in agreement on finances and caregiving?
It can be really hard. The easiest way is if the person who needs care is able to express their wants for themselves while they're still well. It can help corral the rest of the people in line, right? You always fall back on, but what mom wants is, whatever. But if mom is the difficult person, then that sometimes falls apart. Mom sometimes says, whatever you do not put me in a nursing home, and is adamant about it and will make your life miserable if you even suggest anything about it. But mom needs to go in a nursing home because it's the only safe place for her to be. You have to put her in a nursing home, and then you feel guilty about it for the rest of your life. So, people have, every family is going to be different this way. Clear wishes are the number one way to make everything sort of fall into line. There are ways to sort of carve out legally with trust and things like that the people in the family who are known drug addicts, gamblers, people who have mental health problems, the known people who have problems that way. But if it's just somebody who's kind of like a jerk or has differing opinions, then it can be a lot harder. I would say that what kept me and my brother from fighting when we had disagreements, and we had some of them were financial, like my brother thought we were spending too much money and was worried about the money dwindling too fast and wanted to cut back on caregivers. And I was adamant that the money would last long enough and that she needed as much care as we could give her because she was scared and she didn't want to be alone. And so, I sort of convinced him. I would take out spreadsheets and, mathematical equations and be like, look, we have enough money for this for right now. Let's just leave it alone. And he was able to respect me on that and stick to it. But we had philosophical issues on end of life, like hospice and when it was time to give up. And for that, we just leaned on my mom because it's her life, right? So it was the philosophical part was easier because she made her wishes clear. But yeah, sometimes you just have to give in a little to the other person and hope that they'll give in to you, but not everybody's nice. Yeah. So I don't have any solution for that, to be honest.
I have a question actually for someone in the audience. I am told that the woman who did the audiobook version is here with us, Jody Prusan. And I'm curious, what is it like for you to read her life out loud? What was the experience like for you beyond the usual, let us say, voice acting job?
Well, I was honored to have had the opportunity. It was at a beautiful place, Penguin Random House, and they have a wonderful facility. I had the honor of knowing both of Beth's parents. So for me to read about her mother, it was just truly, again, I keep coming back to the word honor, because that's really what it was. This was for Anne, about Anne, and for a really dear friend. So the entire experience was very personal. It was also very sobering because I had nothing in place. I read that book, so I've been trying to play catch up, but every time I would read something, we would have a little break. There would be the engineer and also the director who was in Los Angeles and myself, and we'd all go, we're in trouble, and we were panicking at different ages of our life as to, are you going to get this or are you going to get that? So it was also a big wake-up call. But in terms of the actual process, it was just so personal and heartwarming and just really wanting to get it right. All I wanted was for Beth to be happy, and it turns out she said so far that she is, but I know right now my 94-year-old godmother is listening to the book, so that again was something I was really excited. We had a little moment there of that I couldn't order it for her or send it, but I said, I need one of your caregivers. They have to order the book on a device that you're going to be able to hear, and now we all know that that's happened. So yeah, it was just a beautiful, wonderful, and I'm just so delighted that I could honor Ann Pinsker.
Yeah. Well, if you're an audiobook person, the audiobook version is outstanding, and Jody did a fabulous job.
Can I just add that it is available through the Brooklyn Public Library?
Yes. Yeah.
So, already, another question. Already we're having ripple effects. This is great.
Two comments. You gave me some real life help, advice, even before your book came out, and that is veterans benefits. And being a Vietnam veteran, I started pursuing and looking. I got some tremendous benefits. I had nowhere that they were there. That's one thing that I have to tell you. If there's anyone here who has a spouse who is a veteran, you gotta look into that. And the second one is, you talk about long-term care is an alternative. I used to be an ex-insurance agent. Life insurance, you can borrow up to 70% of the death value, not the cash, death value, and use that in lieu of. Many people don't think about long-term care and the policy until they're too old. It gets very expensive. And it's much less expensive for children to, let's say, pay for an insurance policy when their parent is 70 or 75, and they can use it bit by bit, up to 70%.
Maybe I feel like that should be your next book. Long-term care insurance. It's a long-term care. The cost of long-term care and the cost of long-term care insurance is just a problem that is very tough, and nobody has figured it out.
Yeah.
Yes, Jody.
And the other addendum when you're writing the next book, I most recently experienced this. That several of the doctors I have known are now going concierge, and that I said this, I thought to myself, okay, so if I start in January and I commit for 5 years to this doctor at $4,500 a year, that's basically in 5 years, $20,000 just for the opportunity to be on her list. Not anything with insurance, not anything with medical payments. And it's just happening. It's real. I don't fault them. I'm not judging them. I get it. I guess it's hard to run these offices, but that's like another issue to try to figure out.
Absolutely. So many problems.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up.
One more
question. One last question, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. And this is sort of like a big picture question. So you mentioned early in the book that we're coming up on the baby boomer greatest wealth transfer. What do you see from a macro level that sea change or that sort of tectonic shift in the finances of the country is going to create, either in terms of more people paying attention to these issues and the issues of generational wealth transfer, or planning with family? And are you anticipating any policy or legislative or other sort of changes around the margins? You talked about how difficult it is to work with banks and power of attorney, and it seems like this is only going to get worse with the volume of these conversations and these interactions that are going to be taking place over the next 10 years.
Yeah, maybe that's a good one for you. You're the policy guy.
Oh my God.
Leave it to Mike to ask a big question.
Yeah, so a few things. One is, I think that it's sort of like the idea of identity theft. It used to be, people had their identity stolen, and you would read these stories about it. It took them like 3 years to get it all done. And enough of those fright stories happened that there are now, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the problem, it's still there, but people, the solutions and the mechanisms and the procedures for dealing with it are more apparent and more known about than they might have been in the past. People know about freezing your credit and things like that. So I think publicity will help. I think with the generational wealth transfer, that's kind of a tricky thing, because in many families, the generational wealth transfer that is huge that we have read about is concentrated in a perhaps a minority of the American families. So it doesn't mean life is going to go on the same for a lot of people, unfortunately. And I don't want to get too heavy, but generational wealth transfer, I think, unless there are policy changes which seem very unlikely to go into effect right now, my guess, not an economist, I just play one on TV, is that it might make the wealth divide even greater than it is right now. But I don't want to end it on that down note.
Yeah.
But maybe you have something happier to say.
I would say that the millennials are much more prepared than the Generation Xers. So that at least they'll be around to take care of us when we're old, because we're all going to be broke. But I think that we have fixed a few key things for millennials and the ones that are younger than them, and I think that they will do better than we did. We had it particularly hard because pensions stopped and 401ks started, but 401ks didn't have the benefits that the younger generations got. They're auto-enrolled, they have Roths. We didn't have any of those things when we were younger. And we missed out on some key years in the beginning. So hopefully they'll take care of us when we're old. Yeah.
Well,
and if anybody needs a book, they're here for $20. And the one in the orange sweater can collect your money.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
So I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for coming and for sharing this. And I think this is possibly the best date we could have done it, because now I'm going to buy an extra book and I'm going to take it to my dad. And I'm going to be like, Dad, I know we went through a whole bunch of stuff, but it wasn't enough. And so thank you. I mean, for those who have not taken a look at the book, one of the things I think is amazing about it is, first of all, that it is just so beautifully written and readable.
Yes.
And then, but it's not like, I mean, I find it a little overwhelming, but it isn't really overwhelming because each chapter has a little box that says, do this now. And then there's like 3 things. And so if you work your way through the book, it can happen in a way that isn't like a mountain falling on you all at the same time. And I think that is really beautifully done. I sort of wonder how that turns up in the audiobook. Like, do you go, and now, do this now? And
Did you read the do-nows? I don't know if we did the do-nows.
I'm just curious.
I think that they have a little addendum about that there's a workbook.
I see. But you mostly read the narrative portions.
Yeah, but in the box, I did read Do Now.
Yeah, do this now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was read.
So pause, do this now.
Great.
All right. So yes, everybody.
Thank you for listening. This has been the premiere episode of the Books at B'ShERT podcast. You can find this podcast at bshert.org/books or wherever you find your podcasts. Search for Books at B'ShERT. We will be back soon with our second episode featuring author Jennifer Baum. That is going to be recorded live on December 4th, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. at the Synagogue in Brooklyn. So if you would like to join us in person, admission is free. Just please RSVP with our office at office@bshert.org. My name is Mike Rose. Thank you for listening.